Karen yanked my sister by her jacket, not knowing she's armed and sworn by the feds. My name is Jason Grant. I'm a freelance web developer and part-time caregiver to my sister. Layla, we moved to Willow Springs 2 months ago. Quiet cul-de-sac, tree-lined streets, and that wholesome Americana vibe the realtor promised would be perfect for us. Layla, she's not what people expect. 5'9", ex-military, CrossFit obsessed, and deadpan sarcastic. Also happens to be a federal marshal, U.S. District Court, badge number 47-1s, and trained to drop a grown man in 2 seconds flat. But of course, Karen didn't know that. When we first moved in, everything seemed fine. Our neighbors waved politely, smiled through their blinds, and sent welcome cards. But I noticed the change when Layla started jogging in her tactical hoodie. She has a resting face that doesn't soften for strangers, and Karen took that personally. At first, it was petty things. A folded HOA newsletter taped to our door. There's no HOA here. Notes about neighborhood quiet hours and parking aesthetics. Then came the threats of citations. Then the security camera mysteriously unmounted from our front door. And then Karen physically dragged Layla out of her car in front of everyone. She claimed Layla was suspicious, accused her of breaking into her own vehicle, and physically laid hands on her before any of us could react. I was inside making coffee. I heard the shout, then a snap like a car door being forced, and by the time I rushed out, Layla was standing stone still while Karen had one hand on her elbow, another waving that damn clipboard in her face. I said, "Show me your ID. We don't allow unapproved visitors." Layla slowly pulled her badge. "ID," she repeated coldly, "is federal property," and then everything exploded. Neighbors screamed. Karen gasped. Layla stepped forward calm, composed, controlled rage. "You just assaulted a federal officer." The world stopped spinning. Layla didn't cuff her. She didn't need to. Karen let go like she'd touched fire. My sister didn't raise her voice, didn't move fast, just stood there, arm rigid, badge out, a controlled storm behind her calm eyes. Meanwhile, Karen stumbled backward, her fake HOA vest flapping open like a paper shield. She was breathing hard, half shock, half pride, too stubborn to quit, still convinced she could talk her way out. "I didn't know," Karen shrieked, chest heaving. She wasn't wearing a uniform. "You can't just park wherever you want and lurk in your car like that." Layla didn't blink. That's not how assault works. The crowd had grown. Phones were out. I recognized a few of the faces: Mr. Davis from across the street, the Patel twins from 2 doors down. Silent witnesses. Karen turned to the neighbors, suddenly shifting tone. "You all saw it. She was acting hostile. I was just trying to protect the block. If she's really who she says she is, why isn't she in uniform?" That's when I stepped in. "Because she's off duty. And also because she doesn't answer to you." Karen flinched. But still, she didn't back down. The officers arrived 7 minutes later, not ours, local patrol. Layla had already filed her statement by phone, but we waited out front just the same. When the officers approached, Karen rushed them. "I demand she be removed from the neighborhood," she hissed. She threatened me. She refused to identify herself. "She's dangerous. Look at her vehicle. It's tinted, unmarked. She had gear in the back seat. I saw it." The cops nodded, listened, scribbled. Then one turned to Layla. "Ma'am, can you identify yourself?" She handed over her federal ID. They froze. "Marshal Layla Grant, District Court appointed. I'm here under Title 28, Section 566. Off duty, on my own property, and now an assault victim." The officer's demeanor shifted instantly. Karen went pale. Then came the moment that will stay with me forever. The officer turned to Karen and said, "Ma'am, we have enough here for detainment. I suggest you cooperate before we proceed with charges." Karen's voice cracked. "But this is my neighborhood." "No, ma'am," the officer replied. "This is America, and you're not in charge of it. The charges were filed that night: battery, harassment, impersonation of a municipal official." Layla pressed them personally. But that's not where it ended, because something else happened while we were at the station. When we got home, there was a typed letter slipped under our door. "This isn't over. The HOA backs its own. You're not welcome here. Better leave before things escalate. Signed, Willow Springs Compliance Board." Thing is, there is no Willow Springs Compliance Board, at least, not legally, and that's when my role in this changed. See, I'm not a cop. I'm just a guy who knows code, HTML, JavaScript, Python, and a hell of a lot about data scraping. I also know public records like the back of my hand. I started with the property registry. The HOA that Karen kept referring to was dissolved 6 years ago, after a failed tax audit. But that didn't stop her from reviving it on paper only. No board, no approval, no authority. Yet she'd created dozens of fake documents, bylaws, warnings, citations, all printed in letterhead I traced to her home printer. More than that, I found she'd registered a community outreach nonprofit through which she was collecting donations, service fees, and community security dues. Guess how much had passed through that account in 3 years? $72,400. From people on our block? Layla brought it to her contacts at the Department of Justice. I brought it to the neighbors. We started knocking on doors. Ms. Patel had paid $500 in weed abatement fees. Mr. Davis had been fined $300 for nonconforming holiday lights. One woman paid $75 for trash can misplacement. All threats came from the same printed citations with Karen's signature. She had weaponized fake authority and was running a scam under the banner of compliance. And she almost got away with it until she touched the wrong woman. At first, people were cautious, scared, even. Karen had ruled with fear. She threatened property liens, promised legal fees, claimed she had a lawyer on retainer. But the more truth we uncovered, the more the fear unraveled. We gathered affidavits, held a town hall. Layla stood before 40 residents and read the full list of charges pending against Karen, plus the DOJ investigation now underway. I showed the financial trail, receipts, fake board member signatures, forged city approvals. People cried. Some were furious. Some were ashamed they believed her for so long. Karen didn't show up to that meeting, but her enforcers did. Two men we didn't know. Black tactical vests, flashlights, belt clips. They stood in the back trying to intimidate us. Layla stood up, slow and calm. "You're not law enforcement. Take off the gear, or I'll arrest you myself." They left. By the end of the week, we had 23 written testimonies. The district attorney had everything they needed to move forward. But the thing that shocked me most, Layla never once shouted, never made it personal. She just wanted peace, because that's what real authority looks like. Karen didn't show her face for 2 days after the town hall, not at the dog park, not in her yard, not behind her blinds. But her presence didn't vanish. It shifted like a toxic gas, seeping in through cracks. Flyers appeared on porches, claiming the DOJ investigation was a political witch hunt. A social media page popped up called Willow Springs Truth, calling Layla a weaponized thug and me an internet hacker spreading slander. Then came the real blow. Someone broke into our car. Nothing was taken, at least. Not obviously, but the glove compartment had been rifled through. Layla's dash cam was yanked off the windshield and smashed in the back seat. A note was left in Sharpie on the armrest. "Back off, or next time it's not just plastic." The police were called. They filed a report. But Layla didn't wait. She installed a Ring floodlight camera, a GPS tracker on the car, and another tiny camera inside the garage. I upgraded our firewall and encrypted everything: emails, files, cloud backups. We weren't just being harassed, we were being hunted. And then Karen went public. She gave a live interview on the local news. The anchor was clearly trying to hold back skepticism, but Karen played it like a victimized queen. "I was simply trying to maintain neighborhood standards," she said, wearing pearls and a trembling lip. I didn't know she was federal. If anything, this is a misunderstanding being spun by extremists. I have proof of her threats. I'm scared to leave my home. It was theater, but dangerous theater, because by that afternoon, we were doxxed. Our address shared, photos posted online. Layla's badge number leaked. I don't think I've ever seen my sister look shaken, not even in the worst days of her deployment. But that night, she sat down on the porch with her Glock in her lap. "I've arrested child traffickers. Jason," she whispered. "Gang members. Murderers. But I've never been hated so viciously for just being here." Then the twist came. The permit fraud. It was Mr. Davis who tipped us off. Quiet older man, former city planner. "Check the parcel registry," he said over coffee. "Karen's got a permit on file for drainage work. But that property, it's not hers." He was right. Karen had filed a false use permit with the county to approve landscaping work on a strip of community easement land owned jointly by the city and 5 homeowners. She used her fake compliance board title to get it pushed through. Why? Because she wanted to build a private driveway expansion, a gated access lane with her initials on the blueprint, and she billed the work $14,000 to the HOA donation fund. She was literally reshaping the neighborhood to her liking, one forged document at a time. Layla submitted the report to her DOJ contacts. By now, they'd moved the case up the chain. We weren't just looking at neighborhood harassment anymore. This was federal wire fraud, abuse of planning codes, racketeering. The U.S. Attorney's Office formally opened a case. A week later, we woke up to a caravan of black SUVs parked down the street, Karen's house raided. The marshals swarmed her front yard while neighbors peeked through curtains. Boxes came out, bags of documents, a seized hard drive. Karen wasn't even home. She'd left town the night before, claimed she was visiting her sister in Utah. But her phones went dark, her social media locked, and the money frozen. That's when the neighbors changed. People who'd been afraid to speak, now they were furious. Ms. Patel knocked on our door with a pie and a folder, copies of all the checks she'd written to Karen's fake nonprofit. Mr. Reyes showed us security footage of Karen threatening his teenager over skateboard noise. Even the Johnsons, staunch HOA defenders, admitted they'd never seen the bylaws Karen cited in her emails. We weren't alone anymore. The community had cracked wide open. We held another town meeting, this time standing room only. I pulled up a projector, showed every fake document, every permit violation, every bank transfer. Layla stood beside me in her marshal's blazer, not in uniform, but just as commanding. "We can't undo what's happened," she said, voice steady, "but we can make sure it never happens again." She laid out a planned formal dissolution of all fake HOA documents, City Oversight Committee for Neighborhood Conflicts, mandatory HOA registration with annual audits, and a local civilian board to report harassment, especially race-based. The applause shook the walls. For the first time since moving in, we weren't just new residents. We were part of something bigger. Then came the tip-off. From Karen's former assistant, a woman named Sherry, who'd helped run the fake HOA emails. She came to our door with a flash drive. She promised me we were helping the community, Sherry said, eyes glassy. But this, I didn't know she was lying to everyone. I can't sleep. The flash drive contained years of internal emails, letters to donors, threats to homeowners, records of payments and quiet refunds, even correspondence with local contractors who were paid under the table to ignore permit violations. Layla handed it over to federal investigators. We never saw Sherry again, but that drive, it sealed the case. Karen didn't return from Utah because she never went to Utah. The morning after we handed over the flash drive, the U.S. Marshals tracked her phone ping to a private cabin in northern Nevada, rented under a fake name, paid with a prepaid debit card tied to one of her bogus HOA community funds. They arrested her at 6:17 a.m. She was barefoot, clutching her phone, still in silk pajamas when they pulled her into custody. She didn't fight, didn't even blink. The press called it a stunning suburban scandal. The DOJ called it a textbook example of weaponized false authority. But for me and Layla, it was closure, or at least the start of it. Karen was indicted on 9 felony counts, including federal wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud homeowners, impersonation of a municipal entity, filing false property permits, harassment with intent to intimidate, hate-based misconduct under state enhancement statutes, tampering with a federal officer's vehicle, retaliation against a federal official, obstruction of justice. Her mugshot hit the news like wildfire. The woman who once stormed our front lawn screaming about suspicious people now looks small and lost under fluorescent lights. Her hair flat, her eyes dull. The same neighbors who once feared her. Now they flooded City Hall with statements, depositions, demands. CNN did a segment called The Fake HOA Crisis, and Layla reluctantly agreed to be interviewed. Not as a victim, but as a law enforcement officer and a citizen. "What happened here isn't just about one bad neighbor," she said, sitting in our front yard, the wind stirring her jacket. "It's about unchecked power, enabled by silence." I was sitting off camera, but I watched her not as her brother, but as a man who knew that strength is rarely loud. She wasn't just calm, she was anchored. "You don't need a badge to stand up for your rights," she added. "But if you've got one, you'd better use it." That line went viral. Within a month, the county launched a region-wide audit of all active HOAs. Over a dozen were found to have incomplete charters, misfiled tax records, and in at least 4 cases entirely fictitious authority. And Karen, she wasn't working alone. Emails recovered from her devices showed communication with 2 other self-declared HOA leaders in neighboring towns. They had been sharing tactics, everything from forged letterhead templates to intimidation scripts. One quote stuck with me: "People comply when they think the fine is official. They don't read, they react." That sentence chilled me more than anything else. This wasn't suburban management. This was psychological warfare. White-collar intimidation dressed in khaki vests and forced smiles. Karen pled not guilty. Of course she did. Her lawyer spun the narrative like a broken record, misunderstood intent, informal leadership. No financial gain, but the evidence was stacked to the ceiling. The court heard testimony from 23 neighbors. Layla testified in full uniform. I showed the forensic audits and email chains. Even Ms. Sherry testified via video from an undisclosed location. The judge wasn't moved by Karen's crocodile tears. Neither was the jury. They returned in 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. With Karen gone, something strange happened. Willow Springs breathed. It's hard to describe unless you've lived under someone like her. The tension that lives in your muscles, the way you scan the driveway twice before pulling in, the fear of another passive-aggressive note taped to your door. But once she was out of the picture, the neighborhood transformed. Kids started riding bikes again. People planted gardens without worrying about landscape uniformity. The Johnsons hosted a movie night on their lawn projector. Someone even spray-painted "No Karen Zone" on the clubhouse wall, and no one complained. 2 weeks before sentencing, Layla received a handwritten letter at the marshal's office. No return address. Inside were 3 lines. "You humiliated me. You destroyed everything I built. But you never belonged here anyway." No apology, no ownership, just one last shot across the bow. Layla read it once and slid it into her case file. Then she looked at me and said, "She still thinks this is about her." But it wasn't. It never was. The courtroom was packed. Press, residents, officers, lawyers. Karen stood before the judge in a tan suit, still trying to control the narrative. "I acted in good faith," she said. "My only crime was caring too much about this community." The judge didn't even look up from his bench when he responded. "You exploited fear, invented authority, and weaponized prejudice. That's not leadership. That's manipulation." And then he sentenced her 12 years, plus full restitution to every resident who'd paid a fake fine, plus a lifetime ban from holding any civic or nonprofit leadership. When the gavel fell, it echoed like thunder. 12 years. That's how long Karen was sentenced to federal prison. Not county, not state, federal. Because she didn't just bully a neighborhood, She committed crimes across jurisdictional lines, forged government documents, misused funds tied to a fake nonprofit, and assaulted a sworn federal officer, my sister. The judge called her behavior suburban tyranny. The press called her a paper tyrant, but most of us who lived on Willow Springs just called her a warning. She was gone, but the damage she'd caused lingered like the smell of smoke after a fire. It took months to rebuild trust, not just in each other, but in the very idea of community. Because when someone convinces you they're the law, you stop questioning. And when you stop questioning, you stop resisting. Layla and I knew that if this could happen in our cul-de-sac, clean streets, well-cut hedges, middle-class comfort, then it could happen anywhere. So we didn't just move on, we leaned in. Willow Springs got real leadership. After months of advocacy, the city council created a community oversight committee made up of 7 unpaid residents who reviewed any future HOA applications, permit use, and neighborhood enforcement efforts. Every rule had to be documented and approved by the city. No more backdoor bylaws, no more clipboard dictators, no more volunteer enforcers. Layla, of course, turned down any official role. "I'm not here to run anything," she said. "I'm here to make sure no one else does unless they earn it." People still contact us. Emails, messages, handwritten letters from across the country. A couple in Florida fined $500 for parking a truck with military decals. A woman in Arizona followed home and photographed for walking in a restricted zone, her own sidewalk. A black teacher in Oregon harassed for unapproved fencing that was identical to her white neighbors. They all say the same thing. "We didn't know this was happening everywhere. Your sister gave us the courage to speak up." Layla hates being called a hero, but even she can't deny what happened next. Because the DOJ launched a task force on HOA fraud, and she was asked to consult, she refused the spotlight, but she wrote the manual they now use to train field officers. It starts with one sentence: "The law belongs to everyone, not just those who pretend they own it." 1 year later, we held a barbecue in the newly reopened community lot. No restrictions, no fake forms, no Karen. The neighborhood showed up in full. Kids chased bubbles. The Patel twins brought their sound system. Miss Tran made her legendary spring rolls. And Mr. Davis finally let people see his drone footage of the marshals raiding Karen's house. People laughed, hugged, ate too much. Layla sat beside me, off duty, sipping lemonade. "You ever think," I said, "that a clipboard and a lie almost ran this whole town?" She smiled sideways. "That's how power works. It doesn't need truth, just enough silence." A week later, we got a letter from a woman named Yolanda from 3 counties over. She'd been bullied by her fake HOA for months, fined, threatened, even had her trash cans stolen for noncompliance. But after reading Layla's story online, she requested public records, started gathering signatures, and exposed 3 forged bylaws. The president of her HOA resigned 2 weeks later. Her letter ended with, "Thank your sister for me. I didn't think anyone would believe me. Now I know justice isn't about who's loudest, it's about who doesn't back down." Layla read it, folded it, and tucked it into a box labeled, "Keep Going." Sometimes I think about how this all started, just a woman with a clipboard pulling my sister from her car like she owned the whole block. She didn't know Layla was a federal marshal. She didn't know we had receipts. She didn't know this wasn't her kingdom, but the truth, it never was. She just got away with pretending until the wrong people stopped letting her. Have you ever seen fake authority go unchecked? Have you watched a neighborhood turn quiet out of fear? Let's talk about it. Who decides what's right in your community and who holds them accountable? Share your story. Your voice may be the one that gives someone else the strength to stand up. Because silence isn't peace, and justice isn't optional. It's earned, and it's defended together.